Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about why India is facing a severe power crisis right now. We also talk about the unprecedented heat waves in many parts of the country and how these two things are related. And finally, we also discuss China allowing Indian students to come back to the country. We start off by talking about the power crisis. Several states right now are experiencing long power cuts. This includes states like Maharashtra, Punjab, Bihar, and Uttar Pradesh. And this is because thermal power plants across the country are running critically low on coal, which is a big deal because 70% of India's power needs are met by coal. In the middle of this crisis, the Delhi government last week also said that this coal shortage could lead to power cuts in important establishments in the capital, such as the metro trains and hospitals. Now, to understand how serious this problem is and what led to it, we speak to Debasish Mishra, who is a partner at Deloitte India and who leads the energy sector for the company. So, Debasish, we understand that a number of states in the country are facing severe power shortages, including Maharashtra, Punjab, Jharkhand, Bihar, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Andhra Pradesh. So, what is the reason behind this power shortage?
So, if you notice the states that you mentioned, they are mostly North Indian states, and we are experiencing a very unusual and extreme weather condition in North India. There's an extreme heat wave going on. In certain places in UP, I believe the temperature crossed 47 degrees Celsius. And that's really a very unusual situation coming in April. Along with that, what's happening is the post-COVID, the entire economy is bouncing back. You would have seen the GST collection in April. It's all-time record high. So the industry, commerce, residences, agriculture, all segments of electricity consumption is hitting new highs. And last week, the entire electricity system, that's the reason why it crossed 207 gigawatt of peak capacity catered to. So that's again a new system high. So both these reasons, both in terms of an unusual demand situation due to the weather condition and the economic revival, is adding to pressure on the demand side.
Right, both of these factors are making people use electricity a lot more. But we also know that global supply chains have been disrupted, and that has led to an increase in the price of coal. How much has that contributed to this problem?
So coming to the supply side, I must tell that India is very rich with coal reserves. We almost have 300 years of coal reserve, but we don't produce adequate amount of coal because we have a predominant dependence on Coal India that produces almost 80-85% of the coal consumed in this country. And in 2014, Honorable Supreme Court cancelled all the captive coal blocks which were till then allocated. And since that segment dried up, so there's a huge, supply side constraints. Although government has been in last 5 years opening up the sector, it had new captive coal allocation as per Supreme Court's guidelines. It's now open for commercial mining also. But its supply side, it hasn't picked up yet because opening a coal mine also take 5-7 years. And a segment of our coal consumption is imported, which is around 200 million ton. And that's the segment which is affected by the geopolitics, the Ukraine war. And there the coal which typically Indian power plants consume, which is around 5,000 kcal, which is around $60 it was. It has gone 3 times. So even that is becoming constrained in terms of importing too much of coal and making economic sense out of it. So both the demand side, it's peaking, and on the supply side, we have a constraint, and that's what is the deficit is all about.
Right, and I remember that last year in October, India had witnessed power shortages. And that again was because of a shortage of coal at power plants. Was that due to similar problems as well?
Yes, so what happens is there are monsoon-related disruption in both mining of coal and dispatch of coal. So typically, power plants are advised to accumulate a lot of coal during this pre-monsoon period. So that's what is the scare, because this time, even during the pre-monsoon period, power plants have a hand-to-mouth existence. So there is only 22 million tons of coal right now with the power plants. And there is around 60 million tons of coal which is mined and being dispatched from the mines. Ideally, these power plants should be having 35-40 million tons by the time monsoon starts. If that doesn't happen, we could be looking at a bigger crisis in end September, October, how it happened last year.
Oh, so this crisis will persist going forward, at least for some time.
Yes, because there will be supply side disruptions during monsoon period. The mines get flooded. There will be less mining activity during peak monsoon. So that happens every year.
And do you think these power shortages could also lead to disruptions in emergency services and hospitals?
Unlikely. It's not that it is very widespread. See, unlike what used to happen when we were kids and we were growing up, we used to have peak deficit of 15-20% because the system didn't have capacity in terms of power plant capacity. India has adequate power plant capacity. Even the current power plants are running at 70% capacity utilization. So the constraint here is coal logistics. So once you crack that, I don't think we will have a situation like what it used to be 15-20 years back when peak deficit used to be, in excess of 10-15%. So it's not like a situation where I would not scare the public by saying that hospitals will not have electricity.
Okay, so then in what way do you think we can stop this from happening again, or at least significantly reduce the chances of this happening again?
So these are more systematic solutions and long-term solutions are needed. Government has carried out a lot of reforms on the coal mining side. Similarly, on the coal infrastructure side, a lot of infrastructure projects, particularly in Jharkhand, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, are progressing. Once those coal evacuation infrastructure in place, hopefully, we'll not have this problem 3 to 5 years down the line. And this kind of geopolitical situation also is, again, these are black swan events, once in a lifetime kind of events where you would have seen all commodities have gone up. So otherwise, coal as a dirty fuel because of the climate emergency and other kind of consciousness, there was no taker for it. But because of the Ukraine crisis, even Europe has started burning coal now. But this will again go back. I mean, once the conflict comes down, then coal will again be less in use and prices will come down internationally. Things will be better. I'm an optimist. So.
And the other thing is that 70% of India's power needs are met through coal. So keeping the current crisis in mind, to what extent should India be reducing its dependence on coal, and to what extent is it already doing that?
So to put things in context, in 2014, India had around 30 gigawatt of renewable capacity. Right now, if you look at it, we have around 130 gigawatts of renewable capacity. And going forward, India has committed in COP26 that we will have 450 gigawatt of renewable capacity by 2030. So the number that you are mentioning, 70% dependence on coal, that will come down to 50% by 2030. 50% will be fossil fuel, 50% will be renewable sources. But India, given its dependence at these levels, both India and China are two countries, large economies, which can't whisk away coal. So China is also in the similar trajectory. By the time it will be 2045, 50, India will wind down and depend on coal less and less. And that's why India has committed to a 2070 net zero target as a country.
And next we talk about the current heat wave. Like Debasish mentioned in the previous segment, large parts of India right now are experiencing unprecedented heat conditions. In western Rajasthan and Vidarbha in Maharashtra, for example, temperatures have remained between 40 and 45 degrees Celsius throughout the last 2 months. And this is really unusual for March and April. In this segment, Indian Express's Anjali Marar, who writes on climate and environment for the newspaper, joins us to explain why this is happening. So Anjali, to begin with, could you talk about just the kind of temperatures we are seeing across the country right now?
So the temperatures are definitely above 40 over many, many places since March, but it has also gone to 45 and 47 at isolated places in as early as March and April. So that's the maximum temperatures India is recording this year.
And this kind of heat is unusual for this time of the year for many of these places, right?
That's right. So the heat onset with the severity which it had made this year is early for many places in North India. March, April are usually the transition months, or at least March is the transition month from winter to summers. And the temperatures normally don't go beyond 40. But this year it has been unprecedented heat over large parts of India early on.
Yeah, and in fact, the data from the India Meteorological Department even shows that the average maximum temperature over northwest and central India for April this year has been the highest in the past 122 years. So, what is the reason for this unprecedented heat?
So the main reasons are basically there has not been much rainfall activity that usually pre-monsoon showers, it is called. They may not be very intense, but intermittent showers here and there does keep a check on the heat. So that has been completely absent over North India for very, very long period. Both March and April, the rainfall deficiencies were 80% plus. So there was hardly any rain, which means, your land is heated up or it's already getting heated up. Plus, there need to be some weather systems from time to time, which will bring in cloudiness, which will bring in other factors wherein there is control on the solar heating in the summers. So those weather systems were also largely absent. So these are the two main reasons for the past 2 months where heating has been in excess, you can say.
And now we have entered May. Do we know how much temperatures are likely to rise?
So May in general or climatologically is the peak month for summers in India. In over Rajasthan or places like Gujarat, West UP, West MP, temperatures do go around 45 or above, which is normal. But this year, it can remain like how it was in April and can continue. I will not be able to say by how much or what range it can, but it can continue as it is today. There is no much respite expected, especially over northwest and central India regions for May. Whereas, thankfully, the other rest of the country, southern peninsula, east or extreme north, there the May is supposed to be less hot in comparison to central and west India.
And Anjali, what are the biggest concerns going forward? Like what problems are we likely to experience because of this temperature rise?
So I'll start with an example. Odisha has announced school closures in the last week of April just because of the heat wave. Schools have barely opened after the COVID waves, and now they've announced closure of schools because of heat waves. So you can imagine the impact on human health if temperatures go to 45 or persist for very long periods on human health. Another example I can give you is in Maharashtra. This year there have been 21 heat stroke related deaths. And whereas Maharashtra's Vidarbha, only one section of Maharashtra was really affected by heat wave. So human health in a broad perspective is highly dependent or would be facing the maximum impact if people are exposed to such temperatures. We must also realize that there are a lot of pre-monsoon activities, outdoor activities in terms of repairs, in terms of construction that go on. So health of those workers, health of people whose jobs require them to be outside, it'll be at big risk. Similarly, elderly people will not be able to bear such temperatures. Human health, I would say, is one. Two would be strain on our resources like power, water. There'll be higher demand during these summer months when temperatures go around this range, and there'll be strain on our existing resources. We're already seeing power demand at its highest this year, and how there is a shortage and how so many states are facing power cuts, even up to 8 hours in Rajasthan or Jammu for that matter. And lastly, I would also say that forest fires or excess of heat could trigger some other events, like, for example, forest fires. When you have arid land, very hot atmosphere, then naturally the post-winter biomass, which is there in the forest areas or in the fields, can ignite and can lead to forest fires.
Yeah, the drier the forest, the more likely it will catch a big fire, right?
Correct. It's more vulnerable to catch fire. Yes. So the effects are multifold, not just for humans, for animals, for our resources. So heat over this prolonged period or such temperature ranges is definitely not very good.
And now experts warn us that because of climate change and because of global warming, this problem of heat waves is only going to get worse, right?
True. So several climate reports or climate experts, be it the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change or even state level, India in the Ministry of Earth Sciences, have warned that such extreme temperatures or extreme events are going to be a more common phenomenon, mainly driven by climate change. Whether we can link the current heat waves over India, similarly Pakistan is also dealing under heat wave, to climate change or not, Maybe it's too early to comment on it, but yes, we can say that these may be early signs, or these may be the alarm bells for the climate change related events that are awaiting for us in the near future, and which could be turning to a norm in the coming years or coming decades here on. Not just over South Asia, but world over. Climate change effects or climate change is giving a signature of these kinds through these extreme events.
And in the end, we talk about China. Over the years, thousands of students from India have been going to China for higher education. But after the pandemic, a lot of them had to return home, and China since then has not been allowing them to go back. Though last week on Friday, Beijing announced that it will now permit the return of some Indian students who have been stuck in India due to visa and flight restrictions. Indian Express's associate editor Shubhajit Roy, who reports on matters of foreign affairs, tells us more about it. So Shubhajit, why is it that China till now had not been allowing students from India to return to the country?
Yes, Shashank, you remember the first case in India of COVID in early 2020 were from students who returned from China as the COVID restrictions started being imposed in Wuhan province. So those students had come back. And then thereafter, as COVID restrictions sort of were tightened and over the period of time, a lot of Indian students had come back. It's estimated that there are about 23,000 Indian students who were studying in China, and the majority of them study medicine. So they had returned to India because obviously, there were restrictions there and all of that, but they have not been able to return since then because of those restrictions. Also, international travel was stopped between India and other countries, and China had also followed this zero COVID policy for the last couple of years. Right now, we don't know what's the exact number, but it would be about 1,000 who are still in India and wanting to return to China to pursue their academic program. Especially if you're studying medicine, you can't just do your course online. So you have to have in-person classes or experience or practicals. So for that, they wanted to return. But this has been sort of an issue between India and China. Indian authorities have been taking it up with the Chinese authorities to allow these Indian students to go back to China and pursue their studies. But that wasn't happening. So now the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said that some Indian students would be allowed to come back. Now they will have to work out the modalities, and the Indian embassy now has to prepare a list of students who want to go back to China to pursue their academic program.
Right, and this issue was also raised by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar last month when Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was visiting India. And Wang Yi had assured him that he would speak to the relevant authorities. But considering that China has been so restrictive about allowing students to return, could you talk about the kind of COVID restrictions that are still in place there?
So China has started allowing return of students from some of the countries like Pakistan, Thailand, Solomon Islands, and recently from Sri Lanka. So they have been allowing some students to come back, not all, because as you know, China is right now going through again outbreak of the pandemic of COVID. There have been restrictions in Shanghai for movement. Also, China has been very restrictive in its policy when it identifies a COVID-19 infected case. So it usually locks down entire neighborhoods, sometimes villages, sometimes entire cities. And any international traveler going to China has to quarantine himself or herself for at least 3 weeks. I know of Indian diplomats or Indian journalists or Indian business people who had to go to China for urgent work, and they've had to quarantine themselves for 3 weeks in a hotel in an institutional quarantine system where only after that they could go ahead and meet people or do their official work or do their business. So I guess that's the reason. Because of their restrictive approach, they have not been allowing these students. But now, because they have allowed some countries, they have indicated a positive approach towards the Indian students as well.
And what has been the reaction of the students to this news?
Yeah, students obviously have been thrilled. The Indian Embassy put out a notice saying that register yourself with the Indian Embassy on a particular Google form. They circulated a link latest by 8th of May. And the students have been saying that this is the best news they've received. They said that they've been stuck in India for the last 2 years, ever since they came back from there. And they have to complete their course. They have to appear for their exams. And these are students from all across. Some are from Jaipur or Delhi or other parts of the country. So I guess it's a sense of relief for all these students and their families who would want their children to complete their program.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.